Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto, and the date is July 28th, year 2024. The time, 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, and welcome all. Today, I have a really provocative talk prepared for you. It was tough going at first preparing for it because the original text that I was working through didn't turn out to be what it advertised itself to be. But I came up with a better final version of today's talk, more pertinent to today's political climate. In specific, the possibility that Michelle Obama might ascend to the temporary throne of the U.S. presidency. So, with that in mind, I dedicated today's talk to Obama as Assassin's Creed live action role player, right? That was really the final pieces of the puzzle that came through today when I was thinking of a title, a snappy title for the talk. He's an assassin. He was a hired assassin, sanctioned by the state, of course. And so I started thinking about popular culture references and came up with Assassin's Creed. So I looked into it because I'm not a gamer. I typically disparage them, but I have something important. Hopefully I can get into it later to state about gamers and the whole game universe. I think it's very important to study it. And I'm doing all I can to avoid being immersed in it myself, but I might have to for research purposes. But Assassin's Creed, if you don't know, is a game by Ubisoft that came out several years ago, which is about the centuries long, probably going back to millennia, 1,000 years. The conflict between the Order of the Assassins, or as they're sometimes known as the Hashashins, sometimes they're known as the Ishmaelis, which are very much alive and well today. And they originate from India, southern India, not the Middle East, although they're global. In fact, you might be aware of one of them, Prince Ali Khan, because he married Rita Hayworth, right? So he put some of that Hashishin bloodline into the celebrity nexus here. And if you check out some of these celebrities that I've been reviewing from time to time, political or movie stars, or music stars, you will find oftentimes these bloodlines. That's more important, the bloodlines, that is, more important that supposedly some people hung out in Topanga Boulevard or Topanga Canyon and created the counterculture out of whole cloth. That's a specious argument. And I'm beginning to think more and more that argument was created in order to distract from the real font of hereditary power, which is the bloodlines, the royal bloodlines. So Obama, if you do not know this, is of a royal bloodline. In fact, you can trace one stream of his family lineage to the royal house of Britain, right? People code him as being black, right? And by the way, I said black because the latest version of Assassin's Creed, I'm sorry, I'm digressing already, is a Shadow or something like that. And by the way, Ubisoft is a Canadian organization. So that already tells me Five Eyes. But what they've done with the latest version of Assassin's Creed is to valorize, that is, artificially inflate, valorization, like currency, valorization, to inflate the ego, collective ego, and to compensate for the insecurities of the Black populations of the world, particularly those in the United States of America, because they've been taught historically how downtrodden they are. And large segments of them have been, but it's more likely the case that if Blacks in America have been downtrodden, it's because of their own fellow Black people I call them the black bourgeoisie, or E. Franklin Fraser calls them the black bourgeoisie. So don't get it twisted when I talk about Brahman. You're always defaulting to the television or the cinema version of what a black person is, right? You're thinking Denzel Washington. You're thinking about whoever, right? Whoever's being promoted now as the archetypal contemporary black man or black woman. But what happened with Ubisoft? These are Canadian white people. One of them is a French Canadian, which fits into the theme of this talk, which is about the bloodlines and the assassins, the Knights Templar versus the Hashashins, right? Because they originated in southern France. So I see all this is all very much related. Assassin's Creed. They posited this as their new hero, the new face of the franchise, of the universe of Assassin's Creed, a black samurai. His name is Yasuke, right? And you've been hearing these stories, and they're on BoobTube all the time. And there's these protests going on. Hey, how come when we see these movies from Japan and there is no black people in it? Well, because it's Japan. Just because black people are way overrepresented in American popular media does not mean that they're omnipresent. Globally, they're a really small segment of the population. Even when within the United States, black people have never been more than 12, perhaps 15% of the total population. Right. And if you ask the average American, or better yet, ask a person who's non-American, lives outside the U.S., ask them what they think the population of black people in America, and they'll say, "Oh, black America is 40%, 50% black." That's how distorted it is, and black people themselves has internalized this really inflated sense of who they are and what they represent. And this is in no way minimizes their true intellectual, spiritual, artistic accomplishment. That is very real. But I'm talking about black people in general being played, and they're being played by the black bourgeoisie, who are really the ones who are the controllers here. So that's what this game is about. And I'm using all this backstory here as a way to make plausible to you why someone who came out of nowhere, like Barry Soetoro was one of his identities. His last known identity is Barack Hussein Obama. How someone like that can arise from supposedly being born in Hawaii, which might be true, but his parentage is, and we're going to get into that in a moment, is questionable. And how he rose to the White House, right? Satisfying the unfulfilled dream. I'm exaggerating, of course, I'm mocking it. Satisfying the unfulfilled dreams of the guilty white liberal masses and the oppressed black people of the world and the yellow people who feel guilty for being successful in American society without any sort of welfare handouts or minority set-asides. We got a lot of them yellow people who are fronting as Asian Americans, who are holding back Americans in general by pretending to be an oppressed minority, whereas most of these people are from the international bourgeoisie, they're elite transnationals. I had one in my department, and she fessed up to me. I took her to lunch because she was interviewing for a job. She confessed her father was the ambassador to Germany from Singapore. So she was not some ghetto Asian like me, right? I'm ghetto, right? There are some of those too. You don't see that. And if there are any old black people who are watching the show, you will know that there were always Orientals living right next to you. Mexicans, yellows, or Orientals as they were called, and black people, and lots of hillbillies too. That's why I grew up loving country music. because they couldn't afford to live anywhere else, so they live with us. They were unofficial minorities. Then that's where the class comes in, right? The class system. Yeah, so she was passing as a depressed minor. So the point I'm making here is this: the racial politics is a disguise for a long-standing, centuries-long bloodline-based elite that's running right through to election 2024. And I give you a prime example of the quote-unquote hillbilly, as in hillbilly elegy, supposedly penned by J.D. Vance, who's a Yalie, by the way, comes out of Yale Law School by way of Ohio State University, which one of their heavy contributors is Leslie Wexner. And if you want to know more about him in depth and his parents, because you've got to talk about multiple generations, right? They don't come out of nowhere. They have a lineage. They have a bloodline. Then you read Kirby Summers' Substack to get that, right? And you will, and I'm telling you this because then you will begin to understand the real history of American society, of the North American continent, of the Americas, and of the world. This is a world historical breakthrough that you and I are you and me, that we are sharing because of this huge explosion of once forbidden or hidden knowledge that we weren't getting K through 12, kindergarten through high school, or definitely not at the university. We were getting mostly BS from the American Historical Association and all the official professional societies that controlled official knowledge. Now, the problem is you have a lot of pop-up pundits who are just repeating all kinds of information or distorting, watering it down from generation to generation. But the good part of it is the grounded, historically grounded research is peeking through P-E-A-K, that way, peek like peekaboo, is peeking through to the point where it's transforming our everyday political life. So the average Joe, you and me, we are not so easily, I'll put it politely, buffaloed, fooled into some of these stories that we've been fed for most of our lifetimes. On CBS reports or more recently CNN. No one believes it anymore. That's not me saying that. That's really what the Nielsen ratings people, they're not watching that material anymore. That doesn't mean they're not. In fact, they already are circling around these mainstream people. They're starting to put pop-up pundits on YouTube to recapture, to claw back that audience that they lost. So anyway, this talk that I'm giving today is in that spirit of liberating this crypto knowledge, that is hidden knowledge that has been kept out of our hands, right? And more people, not just Americans, but people all over the world, are now heavily invested in what used to be called conspiracy theory. Even Wikipedia, I checked this out yesterday. Look under, you do it yourself, Knights Templar, and printed it out, and there's 40 pages on the Knights Templar. And that's not taught in K through 12. It's not taught in the university. Maybe sort of on the side, just in passing, but there should be whole courses structured around it. In fact, if I were to teach a seminar, a graduate seminar, I would teach a seminar based around the game Assassin's Creed. And from there, we would pool all our resources and our knowledge and we could nerd out about the Assassin's Creed gameplay and the role players and the non-acting role player and all that. We can just completely go in on it and thereby learn the true history of civilization, not Eastern civilization, not Western civilization, not the North, not the Southern hemisphere, but world civilization because it was an integrated system as early as maybe even earlier than 500 years ago, at least. So when we talk about the New World Order, it's something that's been in formation for centuries, and it's supposed to be reaching its final stage because of the technocratic infrastructure that's laid in there. You've heard about the AI and all the other techniques that have been imposed that's supposed to bring down the final curtain on humanity as we know it. And a key component of bringing down humanity, of course, is population reduction with an eye towards population elimination. A few of us will be left over as kind of like pets for the household, and we'll be bred for certain cute characteristics. Some of us will be kind of furry. Some of us will have long hair. Some of us will be certain color, certain, it's just like we breed dogs and horses, like Dr. Malone, Dr. Robert Malone. He's a horse breeder primarily, and that kind of makes you, like elite for horses that are only bought by royalty, right? Again, we're talking about bloodlines. This is the Robert Malone, the guy who takes credit for his Chinese grad students inventing mRNA. That's why there's so much attacks on Chinese in the laboratories in America, the Chicoms. In fact, Governor Rick DeSantis has banned all Chinese from the laboratories because they're done. They're the coolies, right? After the railroads were laid down, the foundations of modern transportation were laid down by the last quarter of the 19th century. They got rid of John Chinaman. They passed legislation. The Congress said no more Chinaman, and that didn't resume until 1924. By the way, I don't know if you took notice of my new garment. I figure if Black people and white people can appropriate my culture, then I'm going to do some self-appropriation. How's that? I'm getting ahead of you, right? So here you go. It's my new look. In fact, I think I'm going to do all my future casts here wearing my Orientalist garb. You call it Orientalist. If I'm going to start wearing it on the street too, and I'm going to make it a hipster fashion. Okay. To continue, then that's the prologue here. You check out Ubisoft. In fact, let's check it out now, just very briefly, because I know I have people who don't know what video games are. Yeah, I certainly don't. And for the younger generation who grew up on video games, feel free to make comments down below to educate me. That's the kind of commentary I appreciate, right? I don't appreciate you telling me, well, gee, you're talking about what Stu Peters said last week. Well, Stu Peters is just some Bales bondsman who's someone put money behind, or Crowder, all these retooled comedians. There's some big money put behind those guys because they want to have you understand history, society, and culture as one running joke, as a punchline. But you know what? The laugh's on you. Okay, so listen up. I know you're not used to being loud talked by a yellow man, and you don't like to be down talked by a yellow man. But remember, I'm from the hood. So that's the way we get over on each other, by selling wolf tickets. Right. But this yellow man doesn't respond to wolf tickets because he knows the jive behind it. All right. He lives it. He grew up, he observed it. You get it? So you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel timid. You don't have to feel intimidated because it's all shuck. It's all jive. Just like the black bourgeoisie planned it when they devised hip hop and rap. Right. That was part of the plan. And by the way, black music, as today's black hip hop, I've said it before, it's actually a Japanese art. because all the technologies they use are conceived and engineered and used to be manufactured in Japan, MIJ, made in Japan. Now they're made in China, perhaps Taiwan, but the early manufacturers made them in Japan. So who stole the soul? Let's talk about that. Who stole the soul? And we can blame the black bourgeoisie for all this social cultural engineering. They're sitting on all the boards of the most prominent Fortune 500 companies. I'll get back to this book later. Right. And all their secret societies and all that. Barama's part of it. Believe me, you, or believe you, me. So here's just very briefly the overall controversy about the current release of the Assassin's Creed. By the way, I've given a talk on Ali Khan and the Ismailis, or otherwise known as the Hashishins. You'll have to look back into my old library of offerings. Here we go.
It's only been a week since Ubisoft put out the first trailer for the next iteration of the Assassin's Creed franchise, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and it has been a complete and total catastrophe for them. Despite nearly everyone in the mainstream games media trying to run cover for them, it has not helped them with the fan base, and that fan base is not happy. Because for the past several years, fans have been begging Ubisoft to make an Assassin's Creed set in Japan. Well, they finally did it, but the rumors were true. The main male protagonist is a black man. And we've gone over all of the backlash surrounding Yasuke, the changing of history, people trying to lie about who this person actually was. But the gamers, the fans, they are not buying it. You can just look at the ratio here. It continues to get worse. Now up to nearly 650,000 dislikes to less than 300,000 likes. And if you want to talk about the actual country where it's set in Japan, that reaction has been even worse. Look at the Japanese trailer. 42,000 dislikes to only 5,000 likes. You're talking about over 8 times the amount of people that watched this in Japan disliked it compared to the amount of people that actually did like it. And like I said, the game's journalists have been doing desperate damage control, especially places like IGN. Let's not pretend we're mad. The new Assassin's Creed Shadow Samurai.
Okay, even the Japanese, well, mostly the Japanese people have rejected it. They've overcome their inferiority complex. In the past, they would say, oh, why, it's so great. Our culture is being looked at by Americans and by Englishmen and Canadians, the white world, quote unquote. They didn't understand because they didn't grow up in America. They don't understand that they're not looking at them as equals. They're looking at them from condescension, from the point of superiority, right? And what this particular iteration, I wasn't going to talk about the game, I'm already digressing here, but what this latest iteration of Assassin's Creed does, it takes care of 2 problems that these people have. Number one, black people, gives them a false messiah, Assassin's Creed, right? He's the black samurai. Black, just like in Star Wars, there'll have to be some black hero. In all the Hollywood movies, there's always a black hero now, right? Got to be. There used to be 0, and then they were sidekicks, and then now they found out they can carry a film. Now they're going to make them into samurai, and then that's their number one problem, black people. Their other problem is the yellow people. So they can take care of them by putting the black person over the yellow person in a game that ostensibly is based on Japanese history. But the Japanese people know their history going back centuries. They understand it, and they value it. And they're beginning to figure out, because of the internet, that people are not admiring them, just kind of laughing at them for admiring Keanu Reeves or buying into Tom Cruise. Right. These people who are positing the black samurai are only following the logical progression from your Tom Cruise, Last Samurai, or the Keanu Reeves. Right. Not put a yellow person in there. The only yellow people that are in those movies are women. Right. Because that's the cultural property of the superior group. Right. So the J people, that's my term for the Japanese people, the modern ones, right, who are media savvy, who understand the netverse, are getting wise to it, right? And I've been promoting this view, this understanding, this analysis for decades. And now the larger masses of people, because I used to talk to Japanese people about it. Because I went to a movie in Japan. What is it called? The Sofia Coppola film, where it's set in Japan. Bill Murray. I forgot the name of the movie. It was so terrible. By the way, it cost you 50,000. I'm sorry, 5,000 yen for a feature film. That's about $50. Yeah, it's not a $10 $20 proposition. It's expensive. It's a big commitment. It's a terrible movie, but I went with Japanese people. I said, "What do you think about this?" Because there's just nothing but caricatures of Japanese people, and they loved it. They just think it's so funny and so amusing. Says, "Oh yeah, that's the way Japanese people really are." So maybe I'm the stupid one, but I found it highly condescending, and which is typical. It's typical, right? I mean, you see any romantic comedy these days, and there's always a sushi bar scene, or there's some sort of romantic scene in a Chinese restaurant, because these yellow people are so funny. They are such a kick. You don't even have to do any good writing. All you have to do is put them on the screen, and people are they're going to be laughing their butts off. Anyway, I'm sorry to lead off in such a negative fashion, but it's very much in keeping what today's talk is about. It's the down low president of the United States as a live action role player. He is living out the Assassin's Creed. And now, before I leave today, I'm going to be playing you a cut from the Reverend Louis Farrakhan that calls him an assassin. He calls out Obama as a murderer, someone who's been taken in by those people who go unnamed. We know who they are. And you don't have to identify with them just because you're the same racial, ethnic, or religious background on the surface, because you are not related to them by blood. Do you understand? That is what's important, not the fact that you have the same skin tone or wear the same kind of clothes or speak in the same fashion. Bloodlines. Why do you think Professor Henry Louis Gates of Harvard University is pimping out his 23andMe DNA? I don't know if that's what it's called, but he's doing this DNA. He's the executive producer of a show that brings on celebs. They get to look at their whole genetics, because he wants to show American people how cool it is to find out your heritage through the genetics by using celebrity endorsements for free. So in addition to making his pretty handsome Harvard salary, he's pimping out America in genetic testing. You're giving up your genetic heritage for free to Professor Henry Louis Gates. All right, he's black, by the way, if you haven't figured it out. I'm sure he's Boule. I'm sure he's part of the what is it called? The part of country he's from, the hill country. He's part of the black bourgeoisie, right? Just like his predecessor, W.E. Du Bois, right? He got his PhD at Harvard University, first black man, quote unquote, whatever that means. Harvard University, and said that he stated it himself. He said, we are only going to educate the top 10% of Negroes, the so-called talent and tenth, and they're going to control the rest of the 90%. So that formula has been in play ever since then. I think he was writing in the 1920s, right? Came out in a series of essays, I think in the Atlantic, it was later anthologized as The Souls of Black Folk. Right, that's W.E. Du Bois. So he's doing genetic testing, pimping. So what I'm telling you is that it's reached this stage of control down to the genetics. So toward that end, I want to pay homage to the film director Joel Gilbert, who was really the first one that I can recall, who blew the whole whistle on this bloodline issue. He didn't call it bloodlines. He talked about, he framed it as a birth certificate issue. I'm opening it up further to talk about a bloodline issue. Remember that whether he was born in Kenya or in Hawaii, or whether his father was A, B, or C, right? That really misses the point. It's on the trail, but it's missing it. It's going down the wrong fork. The real point is the royal bloodlines that it's connected to the throne of England. So here it is, Joel Gilbert. Here's the promo for his film, which is one of the top political documentaries of all time. If you can get a copy, I recommend it. You might already have seen it. Let's go.
My father grew up herding goats in Kenya.
It has kind of an ominous soundtrack, but the film is, I won't call it lighthearted, but it's not as heavy-handed as that trailer, but it's chock full of well-researched information. I think there's a couple books on it by Gilbert himself, but since that time, I will tell you, other scholars and journalists of high repute have I won't say definitively confirmed, but have supported the observations of Joel Gilbert. And one of them is David J. Garrow, Garrow. I knew him from reading back. I think it was published in 1986 or 87. What was the name of the book? It was a book on Martin Luther King. Let's see. I have it written down here. I want to get that correct for you because it's worth reading. Bearing the Cross, David J. Garrow, Bearing the Cross, 1986. So I had read that book from back to back, and I've read several biographies of Martin Luther King Jr. And this is one of the best. Another one is Parting the Waters, if you care to read that one. So when I picked up his copy called Rising Star, published fairly recently, 2017, I said, I got to read this. Rising Star, and it's subtitled The Making of Barack Obama. So I thought it was going to be sort of adulatory and slightly demythologizing it, but not really a takedown, because I still viewed David Garrow as a mainstream historian. Most of those people, by the way, you see in the New York Slime best-selling books, those are all establishment historians. Most of them are so well compensated they don't even have to have an academic appointment. Some of them are in academia, but most of them are just very highly paid, compensated full-time historians, right? But they're hacks, right? No academic historian ever cites their work. I should tell you, they cite and they refer to the work of their peers, not the ones you see in the New York Times. I think I should have to tell you this because there's a lay readership and there's a specialized readership, right? So that tells me that there's two truths that are being thrown out to the public. One is for sort of general consumption, the other is for the people who are kind of in the know, right? But David Garrow is kind of in between. But to my point, David Garrow is who is himself is gay. I'm inferring he's not a rainbow flag waving quote unquote activist, but he is self-identified. I don't know. He probably doesn't even occur to him to parade around on once a year. So he's not homophobic, I don't think, unless he hates himself. But he's written, I say this because he's written a book on gay history, right? So I'm just inferring that that's where he comes from. But the book itself talks about the mystery of Barack Hussein's sexuality, Obama's sexuality. And that was rumored as in the circuit for years and years. Right? Joel Gilbert didn't go there, but there's all kinds of stories about Barack Obama being on the down low. That's ghetto talk for being a closeted homosexual. Because until recently, that was a very, very strong cultural taboo in the African American community. Right? Traditionally, the Africanism, right? And also the Christian aspect of it. And then within their societies, the strong family focus in the face of harsh circumstances required a strong male presence, a fatherly presence within the family and within the community as leaders, as educators, as transmitters of the culture and the knowledge. Not RuPaul. They didn't need no RuPaul drag race shows in order to make a mockery of them. Right? That's what that's all about. That's not about Black liberation or Black empowerment. That's about to make fun of the Black male, just like these producers, like Harvey Weinstein, making Black males wear a dress. There's a compulsory cross-dressing ritual that Black lead actors have to engage in order to go to the next level. You know the movies, they're numerous. And there's some people have called them out for it, right? This is where the real comedians come to the fore and speak the truth, right? Like Cat Williams. You don't see him much in the movies recently. Maybe he'll be rehabilitated in the future. But anyway, here's a David Garrow. He went and tried to find the truth behind Barack Obama's missing girlfriends. He pointed out there's no mention of women or girls in two of his autobiographies because he was living life on the down low. His world is that of male homosexuality, mostly white male homosexuals who are living the, what is it called? The Mandingo world. Mandingo. You know, like that guy who's in prison right now down in LA, who used to bring young Black men, drug them, rape them, molest them. Right? I forgot his name. He changed his name too. He anglicized his name. But he's a sodomite. Now he finally got thrown in prison thanks to a Black woman activist in LA, not because of the political establishment. He skated, but she put so much attention on it. And again, citizen journalism prevails. That he's in prison. I forgot his name slips me right now, but you can put it down here. Anyway, that's what Barry Soetoro was all about. Barack Hussein Obama. He was on the down low. And why do I keep saying that? Is it because I'm homophobic or because it's bad? You know? No, it's because people like that are controlled. Right. And now since gaydom has been mainstream, the way of compromising people has become elevated. It's become even more transgressive. That's one of their favorite terms, transgressive. That's part of their psychology of picking up young boys and disappearing them, putting them in enclosures and feeding them and bathing them, then having sex with them and then killing them. That's going to an upcoming talk that I'm going to be doing. This is in Autoland up in Detroit. Right. So it's no longer a big taboo to be gay, so they have to take it to a different level altogether. Children. Right. But that was his world. So here's David Garrow explaining what he came out as a journalist in a non-sensational way, just explaining what he found.
Let me end off. I want to go back to the heart of the book. One thing that really is sort of coming back to the fore again is the fact that you interviewed Barack Obama's former girlfriend and the specifics of that sort of part of his origin story. Why was that so important, and why do you think that still resonates right now? And talk a bit about it. Sheila Jagger.
Sheila
I hope
Jaeger.
I'm saying, yeah, Jaeger. Okay.
Jaeger.
That really seems to hit a chord with people. And tell us a little bit about what happened there.
One of the most striking things about Dreams from My Father, Barack's memoir, is the utter absence of women from the book. I mean, not just the three future girlfriends, but his mother, too. Now,
Who raised him.
Yes. Anyone doing a biography wants to identify and interview all the important people in your subject's life. Alex McNear, Barack's first serious girlfriend, Genevieve Cook, his second in New York in the mid-'80s, and then Sheila Jaeger, with whom he lived for 3 years or so in Chicago. So I went and spent a day or more with Alex. Actually went to Australia, where Genevieve lives, to spend several days with Genevieve. Sheila had never been named before. And again, we talked earlier about how incurious the journalism was. It was public record that Barack, had a girlfriend with whom he lived in Chicago, who was a grad student. And no one had ever made the effort to, go look at the student directory to see who else was living at the same address as Barack Obama. That's how I found Sheila. My great younger research assistant at Chicago went to Regenstein Library and pulled these old dusty student directories off the shelf. We also found the very nice couple who lived right upstairs from them, whom I talked to too. Anyone I think is going to have multiple relationships when they're, age 20 to age 30. There's nothing particularly unusual or remarkable about that. Sheila's story is so important, so powerful, because she's living with him while he's doing the community work on the far South Side. That's the first time Barack has been in a majority Black cultural setting, before Chicago. He grew up in Hawaii. Most of his college friends were international students. When he's in New York, similarly, he's not living in a Black context whatsoever. He's working for a financial services firm. And so Sheila was present during this very formative period when Barack embraces his Black identity. And also when Barack is having his first thoughts about a political career in the future. That's why he chose to go to Harvard Law School in 1988.
Okay, Garrow doesn't talk, not in this clip, but he does talk a little bit about his private correspondence with his girlfriends, where he fantasizes about gay encounters. So the reason why I'm highlighting this is because Barack Obama was and still is a compromised character whose exposure would allow him to engage in all manner of heinous crimes, including the mass murder of non-combatant civilians the world over. In fact, it's been said that the reason why they put a quote-unquote black person in the presidency is so that the U.S. military, its Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American NATO group, can go into Africa and to the Near East in order to take over there. Because now the attack is wearing a black mask. It's wearing a black racial mask. And people are easily buffaloed or deceived by mask. That's the whole definition, the reason of masking, right? And the reason why these shows are important, these discussions are necessary, is because let's say if someone like Michelle Obama gets slid into the presidency, we're looking at the Obama presidency edition 3.0. We are looking at the predictive programming of Ubisoft. We will have the ascendancy of the Black Samurai in the guise of Michael Obama. And the whole origin, even these reporters talk about origin stories. You notice that? That comes right out of the comic book world. That comes out of video games, origin stories, or the universe, the Marvel universe. So these are all intelligence scripted scenarios that are playing out for a new generation whose whole epistemology, their whole way of knowing about culture, society, and politics, economy is mediated through these arts. Comics. I really have to go to a Comic-Con one of these days. Maybe I'll dress up like this, and maybe I'll be mistaken for Miyazaki Hayato. No, I can get in for free. I'll say, oh yeah, I pinned something called Ponzu or Howl's Howling Castle or Princess Mononoke, and oh great, and I'll sign autographs and whatnot. I'll charge $5 a piece, and that'll pay for my trip. Anyway, thinking of scams like this, that's what these people do. Only they talk about in the millions and billions of dollars. That is their mentality. Do you understand? That's their role play. They're playing a role. It comes right out of the video game universe. So that's why this theme is important. Well, he was president a long time. We've got Trump, and now, that's history. No, it's not history. History is never over. And then when Michelle Obama gets elected president, I want you to rewind, look for this talk, and tell me if I was not right. I was right when I outed J.D. Vance, who, by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, he's from Ohio, right? He did 2 years at Ohio State before he went to Yale Law. He has 3 different identities, 3 different names. Barack Hussein Obama only had 2, maybe 3. Right? That seems to be a pattern. Most of us only have 1. But I'll tell you, when you talk about bloodlines and you talk about Assassin's Creed, the assassins versus the Knights Templar, that particular historical dialectic, Marx is wrong about that. He says the history of all human civilization is the war between classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Maybe under industrial capitalism, but that's a very short period of time within human history. The grand dialectic is between the assassins and the Knights Templar. So the Canadians up there, Five Eyes people up in Ubisoft, they got it right because they got their orders from MI6 and the CIA. Those are all very highly literate people who understand the classics going back hundreds of years. They're the ones who get to read the real history. The rest of us get to read Douglas Brinkley or Doris Kearns or some of these other hacks out there. And that's not even talking about the fiction writers, which are also CIA, right? Like the Iowa Writers Workshop. Those are all have the stamp of approval of the company. So our realities is many, many times over mediated, right? So when you get exercised about, oh, we can't have X, Y, or Z as president, you're really looking at the wrong target. You're not looking at the systemic infrastructure, historical infrastructure that puts these role players up for scorn and for envy. All right. So let me conclude with, we're going to conclude with Reverend Farrakhan, but let me, as a run-up, conclude or semi-conclude with a book that was quite instrumental in my political education. And that was the case of the so-called DC Madam, Deborah Jean Palfrey. I think she has a book herself. I have it stored someplace. Her attorney, Montgomery Sibley, has a self-published book. It's still on Amazon. I just checked. It's still available to read up on. Or you can find some material on it on TubeU. Not as much as you would think. And that's a case that should be getting much more attention than it does. The historical memory's fading on that one. And it's because tangentially, at least, if not directly, Barack Hussein Obama was involved in that, right? And I get this from a book by Lawrence W. Sinclair, Barack Obama, and this title, Barack Obama and Larry Sinclair, subtitle Cocaine, Sex, Lies, and Murder, published in 2009. You can't find that one on Amazon. Now, I knew that was going to be, after I bought my first copy, I knew it was going to be a collector's item because I said this book is not going to be able to be distributed widely. So after I bought my first copy, I bought a couple of extra ones. And now I believe they're going for about $1,500 a copy. It's called Barack Obama and Larry Sinclair. You can check it out. Maybe they've come down in price, but they're available used, right? They weren't able to buy all of them up. Some of them got released before they were recalled and pulped, published in 2009. But in it, he talks about his attorney, Sinclair, who had an affair, a gay affair with Obama. His attorney was Montgomery Blair Sibley, who happened to be, and I remember this because I read the story of the DC match. He was also the attorney of Deborah Jean Palfrey. I said, oh my gosh, he's someone that I need to look at. And of course, he was he was in charge, I guess, in charge of her estate that she left behind, which was pretty substantial because she made a lot of money as a madame or procurer to an elite escort service in DC. And she had the names, the black book of all these prominent figures in industry, military, government, of course, maybe even education. She had the book on, literally book on a lot of powerful people. And I think where she ran into trouble is when she put word out that she was going to wind down the business and retire off the proceeds of her enterprise and just quietly slink away. But it doesn't work that way because shortly before, I think it was the day before she was about to be sentenced, because she was put on trial for tax evasion, money laundering, and a host of charges. But just prior to her sentencing, she was found hanged, murdered in her own shed, a storage shed. And most women who commit suicide do not strangle themselves. They usually take drugs or maybe a pistol, but they do not hang themselves typically. So here's kind of the backstory. And the reason I mention this because this guy, Larry Sinclair, cites the Palfrey case and directly connects it to Obama. Let me read verbatim, page 117 from Larry Sinclair. This is the book now that goes for $1,500. Death threat letter alludes to, this is my notes, right? These are old notes. I've been following this case for a long time. Death threat letters alludes to Russert, Palfrey, and Young. CF, the oft-used segment of Tim Russert on, I mean, that means take a look at Tim Russert, Meet the Press, asking both George Bush and John Kerry about Skull and Bones. Tim Russert, the reporter, died shortly after that, after he asked Kerry and George Bush W about their membership in Skull and Bones. He died, right? And there's an allusion to this in the book here. Right? He died in 2008 of a heart attack. And for those of you who are only listening, I'm making the little quotation mark signs here with my fingers. Page 39 to 40, Barack Obama was introduced. These are my notes. Barack Obama was introduced to Larry Sinclair by a limousine driver. And in another book I read, which I don't have time to cite, I'm running out of time right now. The limousine service was owned by Tony Resco, who was associate of Barack Obama. See, the more you read around you, the more dots you connect. And he was an intelligence informant for Tony Resco, and could therefore compromise Obama and whoever else he controlled. Because what do you do when you pull into town in Chi-Town, Chicago, with a limousine driver? You ask, okay, where's the action, man? And the driver will say, boys or girls? And then you state your preference. And Obama said, boys. So he met Sinclair in 2 successive nights back in the old days. And anyway, there's a whole series of notes that I took here. The Comfort Inn and Suites in Gurnee, Illinois. There's enough specifics here that you can cross-check the information. And there was some oral sex, and there was some smoking of crack cocaine, and he described some identifying marks on Barama's genitalia and all that stuff. So there's a pretty good bit of information that David Garrow does not cover, because as a gay man himself, I think he might be very protective of the accusation that gays are the big problem in political compromise, whereas most of the gays live like everybody else, lives of quiet desperation. They live normal lives. I mean, they're not doing like we see in the movies, like cruising or these salacious novels or TV shows. They're probably sitting at home watching NFL and drinking beer and eating Doritos. So I don't know. I can't really know what's in the mind of some of these authors, but I think he's soft pedaling that part of the story. I think he also didn't want to lose credibility or access. I'm talking about David Garrow here. So let's take a look at some of the particulars of the Sibley story, because he was sitting on a lot of information. I don't even know if he's still alive. He might be worthwhile interviewing for any of you people who are doing journalism. Take a look at Montgomery Blair Sibley. Here he is.
Big update tonight on a story we've been following closely on this show. It concerns one of the great Washington, D.C. scandals of modern times. The D.C. Madam case goes back 10 years to 2006 to an escort agency with some very exclusive customers, including notably high elected office holders. Now, the woman running that prostitution ring killed herself back in 2008, but recently, her lawyer from that case has been fighting to release previously unseen phone records from the D.C. Madam escort service. These are records that he says could affect, get this, the 2016 presidential race. And today, that lawyer, Montgomery Blair Sibley is his name. Today, he gave us a glimpse of what is in those sealed documents. In court documents we obtained this afternoon, Mr. Sibley lists the names of 174 companies, government agencies, and organizations from which phone calls were placed to the escort service while it was in business. Now, the names of these organizations are included as part of a new lawsuit that Mr. Sibley has filed with the Washington, D.C. District Court. He alleges that a court gag order violates his First Amendment rights. And the organizations listed in this latest filing are not accused themselves of any wrongdoing. And right now, we have no indication as to why people from these groups would be calling into the D.C. Madam's escort service. But the list is nothing if not interesting. It includes tons of government agencies, including the FBI, the IRS, the State Department, the U.S. Coast Guard, the Postal Service, even, for whatever reason, the U.S. Forest Service. Other organizations include the Archdiocese of Washington, the Embassy of Japan, Johns Hopkins University, and several large companies and law firms. Now, so far, none of the groups appear to have any obvious connections to current presidential candidates.
I have some of those documents, and it's not because I have inside sources. They're available freely online if you want to get the details on the organizations, but the names are not published. I think that's part of the public record, part of the Sibley's lawsuit. So here's Deborah Jean Palfrey herself, the original DC Madam. There's another book, by the way, called Confessions of a DC Madam, and I thought it was about Palfrey herself only, but it's actually the life story of a guy named Henry Vinson, who calls himself a DC Madam because he was the gay counterpart of Deborah Jean Palfrey. She did mostly heterosexual women, girls. By the way, most of them were college students or grad students. And I happen to know, because I taught at the university, that more than a few help pay their tuition through that means, right? Because these guys like women who are young or younger, and they like to be able to talk to them, and have go out to a dinner or a social occasion, and not people think, oh God, where did they pick her up? She's like a street hooker or something like that. Anyway, so it has the ring of truth. And this is what Deborah Jean Palfrey herself says. Here we have an interview.
I have nothing to hide. I ran a very legitimate business. The clientele was very powerful. This is Washington, D.C. Fantasy, this in-between place, truly, absolutely 100% sexual, but it's not illegal sex. Everything is absolutely legal for all intents and purposes. They were watching me and surveilling me for a very long period of time. I had no idea what was happening. This was their threat. You either plea or we'll now even do more horrible things to you. I'm not going to let these people get away with it.
Help me! Help me, please! I'm yourself.
Yeah, I looked on the retailer, the 8th World, Amazon, and there's nothing on the. Well, you'll find the Sibley book. That's the only one you can find out. But when I was looking at this a number of years ago, there were a number of them. They've since disappeared, and I have most of them. They're probably collector's items. So maybe I'll revisit this, because just as this information that she was sitting on could affect the 2016 election, revisiting this case could affect the 2024 election, the current election cycle. Okay, let us conclude then with what I'm claiming to be the role play of the Black Samurai, known as Barack Obama, the Assassin's Creed. Right? He doesn't do the actual wet work, right? He asks people to do it in his name, under his auspices of the executive branch, right? And here's one of his own racial compatriots, Reverend Louis Farrakhan, calling him an assassin, not just of individuals, but of large groups of people, most of them Muslims. Here we go, Louis Farrakhan.
I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think God would give his only begotten son for this world?
Think about it.
Just think. Look at the world that you live in. How rotten it is. We voted for our brother, Barack. Beautiful human being with a sweet heart. And now he's an assassin. They've turned him into them. You didn't hear me. They turned him. They brought him to England. See? Oh, now he can stay in Buckingham Palace. Nobody stayed there. Just a few presidents. Why him? Why? See, we know this enemy. See, America can sit down tyrants, but who will sit her down? She puts her trust in her weapons of war. She threatens the nations of the earth and has my brother calling for the assassination of brother Muammar Gaddafi. What has he done? I can defend that man. You don't know that man. See, you're a victim of that media that's controlled by satanic forces. My poor brother, they're bombing. They said they were only going over there for humanitarian reasons. We're going to stop Gaddafi from killing his own people, and we believe that. You've been deceived. You talk about a man killing his own people when you lie to the American people saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. When you lie and then take innocent young men who come to serve their country and send them to die in Iraq, in Afghanistan, over lies, that's a murderer in the White House. Who will say it? I will, because I have a power behind me that is bringing America to judgment as we speak. Don't be afraid. I'm talking.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking. People criticize me from slipping into Ebonics or Blacklish. Well, I already told you I grew up in the hood. This is no affectation. It's real. Unlike Kamala Harris, who's being coded as a black woman, even though she's part of the fake black bourgeoisie. And I'm inspired by people, truth tellers like Reverend Farrakhan. So how can I not pick up the dialect? It's the cadence, the rhythm of truth, right? He's got a power behind him. And the judgment of America is happening right now. And we each have a choice to make whether we're going to silently abet the larger criminal system or whether we're going to speak the truth here. So with those closing words, I want to wish you a happy election 2024, if there is one, right? Maybe I'm being optimistic, right? We can't assume anything nowadays. The way events have been spiraling seemingly out of control. I say seemingly because they are out of control. They are very much in control, but they're under control in a way that doesn't make any sense to us because we do not know the history But I'm trying to present here today to you from week to week for the past 2.5 years. For the regular viewers, yes, you get it. But for the people who are watching Joe Rogan and Stu Peters and Jimmy Dore and all the retooled comedians and Russell Brand, as you wait for the punchline, just remember the joke's on you. That's my time, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you next week. I look forward to it, God willing. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye.